I'm Rabia Mehmood. Today, we're in front of you again with a story from Pakistan, a story which is basically unfolding at the moment and is a fairly dangerous one. We are seeing that there has been 48 hours of a dangerous online smear campaign targeting the Chief Justice of Pakistan, Qazi Faez Isa, based on a judgment he gave. Basically, he granted a bail to a member of a minority community, a persecuted group called the Ahmadiyya in Pakistan. And he gave this judgment about sometime earlier in February, if I'm not wrong. And now this case and his judgment, which is based on Constitution of Pakistan and also gave references from the Holy Quran, is being used to target him, which is a political game being played. But it's a dangerous trend because this kind of targeting of someone, putting a blasphemy linked target on someone's back in Pakistan, especially someone who is in the public eye, can brings very serious harm to that individual. And yet in this story, we also see again Ahmadiyya being scapegoated for political purposes in the country. Unfortunately, none of this is new. This weaponization is not new. The scapegoating of the Ahmadiyya is not new. It has echoes of what happened in Pakistan in 2017. But this campaign is also a misinformation campaign and a very dangerous one. We saw it being initiated, if I'm not wrong, by a YouTuber who's a former broadcast journalist who is also pro PTI, Imran Riaz Khan, and some other people like Siddiq Jan, another YouTuber. And then we saw the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf's members and former members of parliament jumping onto this bandwagon and adding to this hateful incitement. So this is what's been happening. And of course, people have responded to this and condemned it, and some have not condemned it. We've seen that some of the mainstream press has also contributed to the misinformation through certain headlines and through certain interpretations of the story without reading the judgment, which is available on the Supreme Court's website, or basically just behaving responsibly, considering what has happened in Pakistan in the past in the name of blasphemy and in the name of religion. So to discuss this story, we have with us an expert on the matter, Yasser Latif Hamdani, a lawyer and an activist and an advocate for equality in Pakistan. And Yasser, of course, has been writing on this issue, on the Ahmadi persecution and rights of minorities in Pakistan, longer than any of us. So Yasser, welcome to New Wave Global. And I will just get straight to the point and ask you if you can explain a bit about what was the case and what was the judgment. Let me also add for our viewers that this case is from 2022, and the complainant is one of the key anti-Ahmadi campaigners in the country. So it's very worrying how this has come full circle, this vicious cycle. So Yasser, can you tell us a bit about the judgment and what the case was, so that we can do some course correction, and then we'll get to the weaponization part later on.
So let's putting things in perspective in terms of what happens with the Ahmadi community. We have to sort of put ourselves in their shoes. Not only are so to begin with, Article 20 of the Pakistani Constitution gives every citizen of Pakistan the right to profess, practice and propagate. That's very important. There are very few constitutions that have the right to propagate as a fundamental right. Now, every Pakistani citizen has that, but this constitutional right has been denied to the Ahmadi community for a very long time. Now, however, in this particular judgment, and I'll come to let me start with sort of talking about what the thing is about. The materials that are published by the Ahmadi community, and this is literature that they have for their own community members, is proscribed, and that has been proscribed mainly by the Punjab government. There's the Quran Act, and then there are the sort of, and I'm going to go ahead and say it, horrendous penal code provisions of Pakistan that sort of create this entire environment, an enabling environment for all and sundry to come out and persecute the Ahmadi community. Now, what
Apartheid
happened?
law, basically.
Yes, it's a apartheid of the worst kind, and ultimately, it's a violation of Pakistan's international obligations under the ICCPR, and even and the Pakistani Supreme Court has repeatedly held. Especially, there was this case by Tahir Naqash, a judgment called Tahir Naqash, which was by another Supreme Court justice, where the Supreme Court said yes, the Ahmadis have been declared non-Muslim by the Second Amendment, but they haven't been declared non-citizens. However, the fact is that their citizenship rights have been compromised, and they have been conspicuous by absence, as it were. Now, when you come back to this particular case, what has happened is there's this book called Tafsir-e-Saghir. It was by one of the Ahmadi leaders, one of the earlier Ahmadi leaders, community leaders, and this was published and was possessed and sort of kept by this gentleman, and he was arrested for it. He was an Ahmadi, and he wasn't propagating it or giving it out, but he was arrested for having a copy of this book because it's proscribed. Now, when this case ultimately made, now he was. Let me just also add that he was arrested in January of 2023, and in any event has, and this is something that the judgment also talks about, that even if the charges were attracted, he's served out more than the maximum that was required under the law. So that's one of the things. Now, what the judgment says in this, and right off the bat, Qazi Faez goes ahead and says that the fundamental right to religious freedom, which is the right to practice, profess, and propagate your religion, cannot be derogated. Now, that's the key thing that people have latched onto. The fact is that the judgment does not actually allow the Ahmadis to propagate their religion to other communities, or at least Muslim community, which would be sort of the main trigger of bringing in the penal code provisions. The judgment doesn't say that. The judgment does not allow publications by the Ahmadis. It just basically says that the provisions were not attracted in this case, and Qazi Saab is also someone who's big on sort of bringing in the scripture and talking about religion. He says that the Quran itself says La ikrah fid din, and that's the verse he quotes in it, and he says that spirit of Islam, the essential spirit of Islam, with respect to religious freedom, is incorporated in Article 20 of the Pakistani Constitution, which I already spoke about, fundamental right to religious freedom. Now, given that situation, had the people who entertained this complaint, and you were absolutely right, the person who filed this complaint is a serial, that's his business, really. I mean,
Yeah. Mhm.
and I'm going to go ahead and name him. Is it allowed? One
No,
can
go
one
ahead. Hassan Muawiyah, I'll name him.
Hassan Muawiyah. Yeah,
Yeah.
Hassan Muawiyah, who's, by the way, very influential. This is what
True.
he does for a living. He basically goes ahead and sort of, files these complaints against the Ahmadi community. He's funded for it. And so during
It's an
the hearing,
organized, it's an organized campaign by him. It's been going on for years. It's been
exactly,
going
and
on for years. So it's a targeted
it's funded.
campaign. Yeah, it's funded.
Yes, it's funded. The thing is that during the hearing itself, when this case was being heard, uh, Chief Justice actually had some choice words for him. He called him to
Mm.
the podium, and he's like, and he said a few things to him. But other than that, the judgment itself does not. I mean, what it doesn't do. Let's talk about what it doesn't do. What, by the way, I would want it to do, but it doesn't do,
True.
is, yeah, it does not declare Ahmadis Muslims. That's something that in any event only the parliament can do or undo or whatever. So it doesn't declare Ahmadis Muslim. It doesn't even give them their fund. It doesn't even restore to them their fundamental right of religious freedom, as it were. It doesn't say it. It just simply restates the principle that fundamental rights cannot be derogated. And it all the judgment does say is that when you're looking at these provisions, don't apply them unthinkingly. And this is the officials, of course. There's nothing in the judgment that gives, or even comes close to restoring, the idea that Ahmadis, are equal citizens or whatnot. Now, what has happened subsequently, and this started with this one senator, Dr. Abdul Karim. He's some LA Hadith scholar as well, who's on a special technocrat seat in the parliament. He started this whole thing. He later deleted his tweet and said, he was wrong. But he started this whole thing a couple of days ago. And this was still, remember, the judgment came on the 6th of Feb, or
Six
I
of
think,
them.
yeah, it
No,
was
it did.
6th.
It did.
Yeah. And this guy started it like I'm guessing about 4 days ago or something like that. Um,
During the Twitter sort of,
Yeah, right
suspension.
before that. Right,
Okay, right.
right. Absolutely. Like immediately before that, he had actually started this thing on Twitter, and then his tweet went viral, and then he deleted it, and then he made the clarification that he was wrong. I mean, somebody must have reached out to him or applied some pressure or whatever. The idea that a chief justice of the country can then become subject of such a malicious and kind of smear campaign. One of the the clerics, I think it was Abdul Ghafoor Hedri or someone, he's actually said that you're the next Salman Taseer. So they've
Oh,
gone ahead, and this is now incitement to violence. And then coming back to, I mean, nothing in my opinion sadly can be expected of the PTI, but their leadership, the way they've gone, into it, especially Ali Muhammad Khan, who's like,
who's
saying that
known for his he's known for his anti-Ahmadi sort of
exactly,
rhetoric and very hateful rhetoric. He's done that from the floor of the parliament when he was in the parliament. The party
exactly,
was.
exactly. And I mean, it's extraordinary. I mean, one can sort of, you started with 2017, but this
Mm,
particular issue, if you think about it, I mean, in 1953, what had happened was that this issue was used by a certain group of politicians in connivance with Majlis-e-Ehrar, which was, and it was done to bring down Nazmuddin's government in the center.
mm,
Then in 1974, the whole issue was manufactured to bring Zulfikar Ali Bhutto and his PPP government under pressure, and they tried to be clever by half by going around and trying to out the mullahs, as it were. But that's what happened. And then in 2017 we saw, I mean, what the let's repeat, let's talk about it. In 2017, all the government of the day tried to do was restore to the Ahmadis their right to vote, which
true.
is a right that has been denied to them,
Yeah.
since, whenever. So they did try and sort of, and what happened subsequently was you had this whole campaign by, PTI,
And
they were obviously supporting TLP and all of that. And then
Tariq
at
Labak.
yeah, a Tariq in the back. And then there was obviously the issue itself is being used again and again. I mean, it's all good, to say that you've resolved in 1974, resolved this age old problem, as Zulfikar Ali Bhutto famously said, 90 years, 90-year-old issue I've resolved. But that
Mm,
90-year-old issue hasn't been resolved because it's being used again and again. And it's simply, and the fact of the matter is, it this issue hits directly at the core of the idea of citizenship in Pakistan. I
mm,
mean, regardless, the fact is, since 1974, and more importantly, since 1984, what we've done is we've manufactured this secondary national identity, which is based on anti-Ahmadi sentiment, you know. And that is what comes up. And anyone who tries to restore it, because I'm very clear about it. I think only a man like Qazi Faez could have done it. I mean, the man's a patriot, and he really believes in that essential promise of Pakistan, and that's why he did it. That's what sort of kind of buoyed him into giving this judgment. But yeah, I mean, that's all I have to say, I suppose.
No, no, good. I just want to also, for our discussion's sake and for our viewers who are watching, give the example of 2017, assuming that people would remember because it was so recent, although collectively memory online, people have like a very, short memory and they don't remember things. Unfortunately, people don't remember it, political parties don't remember it, and our establishment, the military establishment, does not remember it either, or they remember it all too well and they keep on deliberately using this tactic, this religion card, as we call it, right? And we know that when Salman Taseer was assassinated for supporting Asia Bibi, this poor Christian farm worker, that is when the Barelvis organized on this issue of blasphemy in a very dangerous way. There were multiple groups which started at that time or got strengthened. And the TLP is one such group which came out of the Tehreek Labbaik Ya Rasulallah, TLYR, and since 2017 and the agitation they did around this issue, the one that Yasser was talking about, as a result of that basically agitation, they were also rewarded by, they were allowed to register as a political party because they are used to disrupt vote in specific constituencies. And since then, they have taken on this sort of the whole campaign against the minorities or around the blasphemy issue, and all kind of incitement and organizing on the ground. We've seen that because they have agitated so much and carried out so many hate campaigns in Sindh and in Punjab against individuals, some known, some unknown, around the issue of blasphemy. They were also connected to the Jaranwala case into 2023 and many other cases against the Christians and Ahmadiyya and other people. And they are also linked to targeting and attacks on graveyards of Ahmadis, on their worship sites. So there is like a whole list. There is a lot of evidence. HRCP has spoken about that as well. So, but the political parties, at that time, PTI, joined hands with TLP and the establishment in 2017, and the PMLN was at the receiving end. But then the PMLN has used religion, very dangerous religion card, repeatedly as well against their opponents. And one would think that these parties would learn anything, or the establishment, but they don't want to. And that's what's so horrific about all of this. And, now that what I also want to, Yasser, ask you about is, like, you've mentioned that only someone like Qazi Faiz Isa would have done it. We've seen that he's also, rejected the Punjab government and Punjab police's report, so-called in progress report, on the Jarawala attacks, the attacks on dozens of Christian churches in Jarawala area near Faisalabad in August 2023. And he has also heard cases where he has granted bail to very poor Christian young men. Over the last 2 years, Supreme Court, Mansoor Ali Shah gave that brilliant judgment on the Ahmadis' right to, I mean, essentially it was about, it allowed them to, practice their faith within their, the privacy of their properties or homes. And that judgment has been, not been implemented upon. And then we have the Tasadduq Jalani judgment from 2014, and which, HRCP and other civil society have been seeking its implementation for the longest time since then. So Supreme Court is that one sort of, when it comes to these cases, there's just Supreme Court, we say, the High Court, is okay. Sometimes high courts have given good judgments and have resolved cases in a amiable manner, but sessions court, I don't even want to talk about. But Supreme Court is that like last resort for people when they're seeking justice in in such unjust situations. And what kind of precedent does it set, in your opinion, when the CJP is targeted like this for other
I think
justices?
I think it's the chilling effect, isn't it? I mean, we talk about chilling effect on the media, but here we see, this. I mean, this could potentially have a chilling effect on the judiciary. But I must go back. I think when the comment that I made about Qazi Faez, I mean, there are certain reasons he feels very strongly about the country. His father was, so close to Jinnah, and that sort of thing. He believes in that essential promise. I think all of that kind of plays in. I mean, here the ideology itself is a very strong motivator for him. So I think he's going to stick to his guns. I think he's not going to back down. So while there is that chilling effect, and a lesser person, or a person with, who's not made of sterner stuff, would probably back down and, probably say I made a mistake or whatever. But I don't expect that. I don't expect that of Qazi Faiz. I mean, he would not be the man that he is if he did. But yeah, in terms of precedent, I think there are I think there are some very enlightened judges in sort of the Supreme Court right now, and these judges are very clear about certain things. I mean, they understand the will of the people and all of that, but they also understand that the will of the people, or the idea of democracy, should not change into the tyranny of permanent majority.
Mhm.
I mean, these people understand on a very ideological level that just doesn't work, only work cross purposes to the constitutional jurisprudence that exists. And there is very little of it, but still it does exist. But when we talk about, it works cross purposes to the very idea of Pakistan, if you think about it, because Pakistan was supposed to be this idea that, that the a permanent minority should not be dominated by a permanent majority. And that is precisely what is happening with this particular minority in Pakistan. I think that's where the ideological, sort of intersection comes in. A lot of these judges do believe in that essential promise of Pakistan, and especially Qazi Faiz. So while there is a chilling effect, I believe the judges have it in them. Some of these judges have it in them to weather the storm, as it were.
I want to speak a bit about the weaponization of this issue in the online space. As we've seen, you've mentioned a particular, Maulvi Karimuddin, who had a ministry or a position in the caretaker government, and another religious scholar slash cleric. But I also want to speak about the role of the political parties here. This is not a position on PMLN or PTI or PPP for that matter, or Jamaat Islami or anyone. We are basically just looking at how these parties, not just the establishment, but these political parties also use these tactics. And it's a very dangerous game they keep on playing and giving into. People think that military establishment is to blame for everything. Fair enough. They are, as we've seen how the TLP agitators and protesters were called Apne Log, our people, by the former DGISI Faiz Hamid, who is the architect of Project TLP, if I can call him that. And he played a terrible role. It's not done Pakistan any favors, or the role he played in that whole sort of saga. But these you would think that Imran Khan was November 2023 targeted, and on the base, and the reason why he was shot at was linked to religion as well. And you would think these people would have learned something, and I hold PMLN accountable for that as well. They were just like a few weeks back tweeting horrible things, and very which feeds into this right wing propaganda around this issue. And then the role of the YouTubers, and mainstream press as well, the way they wrote their headlines and they did their stories. So just a bit of a comment on that and the role they play. It looks like no one wants to behave responsibly at all.
Yeah, I think the YouTubers, especially. I mean, you talked about Imran Riaz Khan, and then there's this Siddiq Jan fellow. Imran Riaz Khan, has been, in order to get these eyeballs, has been making these anti-Ahmadi statements in the past as well. And this goes before, and he came up with this entire conspiracy theory about, Ahmadis being Jews or something like that. Some weird thing that he came up with. So I think this whole thing, this cabal, as it were, of YouTubers, especially at this moment, PTI pro PTI YouTubers, but this obviously is not something limited to them. It's broader than this. I think there is a lot of sort of these YouTubers are really hungry for this fame, and they want eyeballs, and this is one of the ways to sort of attract them. And it seems I just don't get it. I just don't understand the level of hatred that has been created. I mean, Ahmadis were declared non-Muslim in 1974, and since 1984 they've had issues. But over the last 10 odd years, and especially since 2017, when this entire thing happened, this has just multiplied. I mean, they've been, they're almost considered subhuman by
Yeah,
the common
data to
person.
prove it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and yeah, and I mean, if you think about it, and this is one of the things, one of the game plans of these fringe groups that are no longer fringe. I mean, Hassan Moabia and his group
Mm.
have been on it for a while. I remember that when I started off practicing as a much
Mm.
younger man in Lahore High Court, I used to see these guys there, and they were not taken as seriously as they are now. Now they're untouchables, and and this is again one of the reasons why Qazi Faez Isa has been targeted so vehemently, is because he actually took him on. He took him on in court, and he basically shamed him for saying what he did and all of that. I think this, ultimately, the state needs to come down really hard. And I think, and this is important for the establishment, especially the establishment needs to realize that this is the kind of dangerous game you're playing. Now you have to kind of put an end to this before this goes, because in my opinion, and I have looked at this Ahmadi issue for a while, as you know, as you said, the Ahmadi situation is, at the moment, it's standing. There's several, so there are stages of genocide, and I think the extermination stage is fast approaching. So unless the state does this, unless the state stops this, there's going to be some kind of bloodletting, which is going to be unfortunate, not just for the Ahmadi community. Of course, it's going to be tragic and all of that, but for Pakistan itself, it's going to become such a big issue. It's going to be something that Pakistan's not going to be able to wash off for centuries, in my opinion. So I think that the establishment, there's someone should be crying halt right now and saying you need to fix this. You need to crack down on these people. You need to stop the funding. You have to make the funding for groups like Hassan
Mhm.
Moawiya's group. And you're also familiar with his family connections. So I think this is what needs to be done.
Okay, so this is also very underreported. So we're just sort of, I'm thinking of like us going on and on about this. It's very underreported because they, like Yasser is saying, these guys are untouchable. Some groups, there is a Blasphemy Lawyers Forum group, there's a Blasphemy Lawyers Forum Council, there is a, they interpret concepts of Islam in an extreme way. They misinterpret them and abuse them. Anyone can tell that. You don't have to be a scholar of Islam to be able to see that. But there is a lot of impunity. Yasser is speaking about the impunity that these groups enjoy, and it's the same with the TLP. They have carried out, and they're organizing around this issue in with a lot of impunity, and so have the anti-Ahmadi campaigners as well. And like he's saying, they started out in 2011, 2012, 13, and at that time they were not as organized, but over the years they've been very organized and given a lot of leeway to do whatever they want to. And it's not done us and our society any favors at all. Yasser, thanks for joining us and telling it like it is. This was we were fairly sort of harsh today, and spoke about things quite openly. But what can one do? This issue is a very dangerous one, and you have to call it out. Thanks for watching New Wave Global. Khudafis.